Yeah, so I'm Martin Smith. I'm a site reliability engineer at HashiCorp, and I have this idea that I'd love to talk to you about called thinking about reliability as a product feature. And it's really not a new idea. It's something that uh, goes kind of back to the beginning of what SRE was supposed to be, but maybe something that we haven't thought about as much lately. And I'd love to bring it back to that. So again, that's me. My pronouns are he, him. You can find me on Twitter at MartinB3. Um, and I've had lots of roles as a DevOps engineer and a site reliability engineer in the past. I've been a tech lead for an SRE team. I have had many opportunities to define the role of SRE, what activities they do, and more importantly, like try to figure out what the impact of an SRE team should be. So I've worked on that a bunch, and hopefully some of these ideas will give you some ideas about how to do that on your own team. So first, kind of just wanted to talk about what SRE is. So SRE at its basic is treating operations as a software problem and use software engineering techniques. I'd say this isn't surprising given the timeline. You sort of had Agile in the 80s and 90s being applied to software development, and it was basically time for people to start thinking about software engineering for other parts of the tech world aside from software development. So here's sort of this timeline of 2003 when Google started doing SRE as the first place that did that. Usenix in 2014 started doing an SRE con. Google published this SRE book, which a lot of folks follow pretty closely. I put a note there because even Google says not to follow it exactly, adapt it for your organization. And by 2021, a lot of data shows that like a fifth of organizations doing some kind of technical role have an SRE role in it. And SRE is as much a philosophy as a set of skills. We'll talk about that some too. So thinking about what SRE does, there is one like a downside to SRE that a lot of folks talk about, including the gentleman that originally founded the SRE team at Google, which is if you let SRE constantly sort of improve, continuously improve, they're slowing down the firefighting that used to happen before SRE was a thing. So it sort of can be a discouraging thing, is that SRE is just kind of like slowing things down, or SRE wants to write code instead of fixing the outage or things like that. So a lot of folks would say you can't really succeed with SRE without thinking about DevOps. It's totally cultural. And also you can't really succeed with SRE without thinking about things like cloud native architectures, right? They go hand in hand. If you can't go back to some software that was deployed in Windows in 2003 and just put SREs on it, if they don't own the source code, that's not going to work, for example. So SRE has a lot that it has to do, right? It's not just a philosophy, but it is a philosophy and a skill set, and there's a lot of skills in there. So I kind of wrote some of these down. I looked up some definitions of SRE. It's really an overwhelming set of things. If you look at just the list of what SRE is responsible for some organizations, that's practically all they do. Everything from emergency response monitoring, efficiency, performance, latency, so much. Even just picking one item like observability, look how many tools, just Googling, that I was able to find that are on observability. So holy moly, an SRE is not going to know all of those things, right? But I think we also know that SREs do a lot of things. And in our industry, those things, are this long recitation of things like incident management, retrospectives, what else? All of these observability tools, all of these like chaos engineering, all of these, just this whole set of practices that SRE does, that if you look it up, I feel like we might have lost the forest for the trees, or the trees for the forest, so to speak. Reliability at the end of it and at the beginning of SRE was about a product feature and making a product reliable. I've also found that when I'm trying to explain what SRE is to business leaders, often I go back to this definition too, right? Which is if I can't explain how what SREs do affect customers directly and the reliability that they're thinking about, it's usually a sign that I'm not working on the right things as an SRE. So one caveat to that is sometimes an SRE is about making that role is about making people more efficient internally because we know that that makes our customers have a better experience. But ultimately, you should ask yourself, like, can I tie this back to why the customers are having this good experience, right? Am I doing something that helps there? So shifting that focus back to thinking about reliability as a product feature. So one thing that this does, if we just keep thinking about it as a product feature, is it helps organizations really even just think about what reliability is for their product, right? That could be like resiliencies, that could be like fault tolerance, that could be something like scalability. Can I throw a bunch of work on it as a customer and expect that it'll actually give me results? Scalability, observability, rather. I think understanding the internal state of a system from its outputs. Security, do the customers trust that the thing is doing what it wants? These are all product capabilities that aren't often well understood. I put a quote at the bottom of this slide because a friend of mine likes to say that reliability is a product feature, whether you devote engineering time to it or not, right? So your customers know how reliable your product is, whether or not you've actually developed any kind of actual functionality to make it reliable. I'd also say, like, it's really important to argue that reliability benefits from product management support. So product managers, we love them. I wish I had more of them in every role I've been in, but they do things like they help communicate with stakeholders, they build roadmaps, they help with prioritization. Like, for example, thinking about reliability as a product feature, what do you know who your internal stakeholders are for the scalability of your product? Like, do you know the development teams that are throwing work at your product or adding features and then expecting it to actually be able to run those for customers? What's on the roadmap for the observability of your product, right? I think that's a real popular discussion these days, is like, what are we doing with logging? What are we doing next with logging? What does 6 months of that improvement look like? What does 2 years of that improvement look like? And most importantly, like, what metrics are you collecting to be sure you're actually delivering on that roadmap, right? So that's like classic product management. And we often don't get it in SRE as product management. Sometimes technical folks end up wearing the product management hat. It's also important to think about how it aligns with other features and roadmaps, right? If you're planning to release some feature for your product that doubles the amount of work it does, well, guess what? Observability matters. The performance and scalability matters, right? Even if you're developing a feature that's going to bring in 10x the number of customers, like that's a huge thing. And I hope you're thinking about reliability when you're going to 10x your audience. So yeah, again, if you don't plan for reliability specifically, your customers are going to get what they get and make their own assumptions about your reliability. This happens all the time if you see out in the industry sites or products where people know that they're unreliable, and the customers get frustrated because customers know about the reliability of your product, whether you do or not. So it starts to sound like any other product feature, right? I've argued for product manager, internal, external stakeholders. That's all by design, like making it explicit as part of your organization's planning. Organization's planning has many benefits, I think. I put this quote, there's this ThoughtWorks technology radar, and the most recent one came out in October. And they actually talk about the trend of thinking about internal teams having products and thinking about themselves as product teams, just like external teams. They actually cite the Team Topologies book, which you could check out for how to organize your teams. But when I've looked up what teams are doing around team topologies, I also find this framework from Simon Wardley called Pioneer, Settler, Town Planner, or I'll call it the PST framework. So I want to kind of tell you about that framework, and actually think it's really helpful to organize ourselves as SREs and think about what we do as SREs. So again, I think this is worth reiterating. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to reliability. As I've seen, just showing you all the things that SREs do for reliability, you should know there's not, depends on the stage of the project, it depends on the team, it depends on the organization, all of these things. But what I'm going to do today is break this down into beginning projects, growing projects, and established projects. And then I'm going to show you the PSD framework and how that ties together. So here's the PST framework. And basically, this is saying at different maturity levels, you need different kinds of behaviors for a project, right? So pioneers are doing things that are inherently uncertain, lots of experimentation, sometimes poorly defined things. Maybe we're not sure how the product is going to fit into the rest of the work. It's okay to fail at that stage. There's lots of experimentation. There's lots of like delay of things to do and accomplish later that you might not accomplish right now. Um, and they have to typically be pretty agile. And you know, this is graph here kind of, or this diagram here shows kind of what that looks like, and what even the life cycle from pioneer to settler to town planner, what the relationship looks like. So settlers, same thing, sort of like growing differentiation, like starting to constantly improve from just experimentation. Start listening to how people use a product or a feature. And then town planners are kind of like probably the least popular type, if we apply this to SRE, type of work, which is defining process, doing operational efficiency stuff, doing modeling. This is where chaos engineering probably falls. So this is this framework of pioneer, settler, and town planner. I encourage you to kind of read through it, look at the graph or the line at the bottom about how something becomes like an idea to a product to a commodity over time, and how they relate to each other. So now, what I'd like to do is kind of talk about some engagement models that SRE can do. So one example of this would be consulting. So you might have SRE office hours, or you might be available for questions, or you might do something where there's sort of a short engagement. It's quick, it's defined, it's in an hour. A lot of SRE teams actually kind of funnel work into this model because otherwise they're overwhelmed by it. So you say, gosh, this other team is asking for help constantly. Let's pick an hour every week and we're going to get together, and that's consultation. And that works really well for some levels of the PST model there. So also process improvement is another way that SRE can really impact the organization. So that's like looking for reliability or scalability patterns that show up, and then trying to implement processes to improve them. So this might be an incident management process or an incident action item follow-up process. It might be production readiness. You might be building a process and framework for releasing new features. It could even be something like SLO and SLA programs, and what a process and like a repeatable program for that looks like. There's also project collaboration is another one. This is usually really well scoped, like we're going to deliver this product and we need an SRE to help us. So this is like maybe you might take a project to implement rate limiting, and like SREs and other software developers might pair together to propose how to do it and then implement that functionality. There's lots of other ones here. Basically anything where you're sort of pairing together, I would call project collaboration. And then there's two others. One is embedding, which is sort of being a member of the team that the SRE is joining to embed onto. You see this mentioned in the SRE book a lot. I'll just call out, I put a star there because I want to call out that the SRE book makes it really clear that when you embed, you're a member of that team. Embedding is not dropping in for a sprint. Embedding is spending time to onboard and you might not be the most senior developer on that team, but you're definitely a contributing member. You've lived what that team has lived. You've walked in their shoes. And then for an SRE doing an embedding relationship, you're sort of leveling up the team, being a multiplier on the team. So once you're a member, you sort of have some free time compared to the team's roadmap, but you know what the team is going through, and then you can actually say, all right, I'm going to teach the team things that they need to know, or help the team accomplish things they couldn't do by themselves. But you want to be a multiplier. You're not just another warm body to throw roadmap items at. And the last one that I want to mention is ownership. So SRE could introduce components that improve the reliability of a system. This could be a Kubernetes operator to improve fault tolerance, or it could be like that rate limiting project we talked about before. And at some places, SRE might even own rate limiting. But these are the kinds of things that when there's ownership, SRE and the teams that are affected should be like regularly reviewing them to be sure that it makes sense for SRE to own them long term. Because if SRE continues to just take on ownership of things, that eventually becomes unsustainable because they either end up with a lot of toil or they can't like do some of these other engagement models because they're too busy owning stuff. So we've talked about some engagement models. We've talked about this PST framework. So I want to say, what would a Pioneer SRE do and what engagement models might they use? So if you think about Pioneer, that's like new projects, right? That's a small change could have a large benefit on a project early on. Experimental work early on might be completely discarded, like a prototype that's discarded. It's really important to have SREs in these early stage projects because they ask questions about reliability early and they can help teams make decisions about reliability early, right? This could be as simple as the making a product vendor choice that if the team didn't have SREs involved, they might not actually pick the most reliable vendor. But also SREs can help with that experimentation, agile decisions, failing faster, but always thinking about reliability. You always want somebody at the beginning of a project involved that is thinking about reliability. So that can be SRE. So have you ever seen a project get close to being released without thinking about reliability or even just operational concerns like work you have to do every week to maintain a product? Pioneer SREs are really a great opportunity here. So they should be part of a team. They should help do the delivery. They should help evaluate vendors. They should build out proof of concepts with your other development teams. And they should be also talking about the architecture and what it means to make the changes for the project and how it affects your larger architecture. At this stage, like any work to sort of cover reliability gaps could be identified by SREs, or again, you could make a totally different decision or direction based on concerns raised by the team. Embedding, talking about those models, embedding is a great opportunity for here. Brief consultation for reliability doesn't always work because often the final output doesn't actually reflect those concerns about reliability or operability. So embedding is really a really great opportunity for an early project with some Pioneer SREs. Their success, how do you know whether it's working well for pioneers that are embedding, is how quickly new products and features get launched, how quickly vendors implementations happen, how quickly something moves from exploration to concrete proposal. That's another way to measure how successful SREs in this model are doing. Probably the largest risk in this phase is having SREs end up being owners. So this is that we talked about back in a few slides ago, ownership being something SRE can do. If SREs end up owners of a whole project or product, they'll end up getting treated like sort of the ops team for a product. And that's all the toil that SREs don't want. That's the ownership that's unsustainable long-term. I'd say if you can help it, do really well-scoped embedding engagements with SREs and products, and emphasize that they're sort of a multiplier resource or a training resource. They're not coverage for the team once this product goes into production. That's probably the biggest risk I've seen with embedding. Now you think about a product that's sort of gotten off the ground that you're building. There's customers starting to use it. It could be in beta or alpha or something like that. It's great to have think about SREs as sort of settlers in the PST framework for a project that's in the sort of middle phase here. So what could SREs do in a project like that? I think that they could help build and mature things, right? They can look for new operational burdens. They can find toil and help automate it away. You can continue to embed at this stage too, if you think about what sorts of engagement models SREs do for this stage. It's actually great to have SREs like involved in the launch of some product or feature. Consulting for SREs also works here, especially if it's a brand new team or a brand new service that's launching. SREs can really help ensure everything is production ready and it meets the requirements for reliability, as well as like operational best practices like, for example, SREs in this phase might encourage a team to do automated database migrations instead of manual ones on the command line. I think at this phase, having an idea of production readiness is super important. This sort of drifts a little into the process type engagement, but SREs that are thinking about like operational readiness can create sort of a minimum bar for a team to say like you have to at least be able to be on call or be able to respond to something. SREs at this stage may even help build some of the automation or on-call things, or even like auto scaling, that kinds of things when you're sort of productionizing something. The success of these SREs in this phase could be measured at like how many new services are going GA or taking customers. What does observability look like? Is there effective logging and metrics and monitoring? Success in this phase is also about establishing patterns that make projects successful, right? Like, so SRE might say, we've seen 10 other teams we've helped in this phase do X and therefore be Y successful on some particular dimension. So SREs in this phase quickly become the town planner phase, in my opinion, just because they're constantly looking for the processes and the patterns to improve a project. Again, there are risks at this phase too, which is that sometimes at this phase, things show up at the very last minute as far as need. That could be unfortunate. Coordination can be a little harder in this phase, especially if a team is racing to get something to production, but a SRE team might not be really, the timing might not be right there. So thinking about town planner SREs, so this is sort of like probably the black sheep of SRE activities. A lot of SREs don't love this type of activity because it's really hard to see the impact you're having, because it's process is such a hard thing to see the impact of. In this most mature phase, products and services are already GA. There's already customers. And SREs are starting to look at, town planner SREs are starting to look at some systemic issues. So overall architecture problems or developer tooling that impacts reliability. I think SREs can influence here, like what kinds of things can they do? They can influence continuous improvement overall. They can identify systemic issues like repeated incidents or poor SLO choices or maybe lack of an on-call process. Driving continuous improvement, again, is like one of the best ways SREs in the town planner role are effective. In addition, they can often find ways to eliminate operational pain or toil, especially large-scale toil, whether that's through like implementing automation, right, which is the biggest tool in an SRE's tool belt, automation, or even things like architectural changes, or this is the part that's less exciting for a lot of engineers, is by developing process or knowledge or skills or training, tooling, helping people learn, which can be applied, like this kinds of learnings or tooling or process or whatever can be applied large scale repeatedly to projects to make them successful. There can even be, as I said, this stigma attached to it, but the impact of it I can't overstate. SREs really act as a true multiplier in this phase, just like a town planner would for the impact on every neighborhood in a town, right? Some ways to sort of ameliorate or like address this concern about SREs not doing as much technical work is to pair them with like technical program managers or product managers. Again, thinking about this like any other product. Pairing them with people who can help drive process and strategy is really helpful, because then SREs can focus most on the technical aspects of what they're improving, while these other roles like a technical program manager can help with the organizational changes that are needed to improve something or implement a process or execute on something. Measuring the success of these, let's see, it's especially tricky for town planners, I would say, because simple metric improvements are often misleading, right? Like fewer incidents, reduced incident impact, or the reduced pages that you might see, or improved SLOs. SRE impact is more than that, I think, in this stage. Qualitative impact is really important to figure out here. Talk to the SRE team's internal customers, the teams they're collaborating with, and understand qualitatively if it's SREs at this stage cause paradigm shifts, right? They help people think about on-call totally differently, or they help people think about some incident process totally differently, or they help with things that are really big, like, mind-blown kind of changes for the organization here. And often that's not even true of the other SREs, right? An SRE might help a team do incident management differently, and the other SREs on the SRE's team might not even know. So town planner is tricky, but all engagement models do work here, I would say. Just kind of like taking a step back from that sort of like pioneers, settlers, town planners model, and then some of the engagement models. I hope this is useful so that you can kind of pick what project is at what phase, and then pick SRE activities that really work at that phase. I will say that, like, sort of taking that step back and looking at reliability as a product feature, it's not a magic bullet, right? Like, it doesn't help an organization that doesn't understand where its product fits in the market, or like what kind of value the product delivers, or like if product management isn't available or is not helpful or has a bad relationship with the development teams. Throwing SRE in the middle and treating it like a product is not going to help. It could also be that if a team really can't like design and deliver their features, adding SRE to the mix is not going to help there either, right? So this ties back to sort of what I said at the beginning, which is there is no one-size-fits-all approach to SRE. So you kind of got to pick for each project, like, what does it need, and use these tools. It might even be as simple as using some rules of thumb in addition to these. This is really popular with SREs, right? So a lot of SRE teams do things like they say, no more than 50% of our time will be spent on toil, or maybe every product feature that goes live must have some sort of like reliability metric or something like that. But combine those rules of thumb with some of these strategies for engagement, and then at particular project stages. And I think that should help focus a team to make the biggest improvements they can to reliability. I did put some other things on this slide here because I've done some research on like how different teams are doing SRE and how organizations are doing SRE. Continuous improvement is a huge theme on all of them. SRE collaboration with other teams is a huge theme. That collaboration can make it or break it for the effectiveness of an SRE team. It can jeopardize a whole product launch. And I put some other things that embedding is very popular. Having some of those best practices is very popular. Check out this How They SRE repo too. And actually, if you're doing SRE, do a pull request there and submit how you're doing SRE. I'd love to hear about how other teams are doing it and what works for their organization. Again, no one size fits all. But I do like this quote, which is from Simon Wardley, that developed that framework, the PST framework, that says, like, take a highly effective company and the PST framework will push it towards being more continuously adaptive, right? So looking at where projects are in their life cycle and then doing the best things for those projects at that stage. That is the end of my presentation. I hope me sort of combining these two themes about pioneers, settlers, and town planners, and then engagement models, gave you some ideas about how to do your own SRE team, or things that you may not be doing today, or things like embedding, which maybe you're not doing as well as you'd hoped, and maybe it's time to start doing a regular retro on it or something to kind of figure out how to do better. In addition to giving this talk, I've started Gainesville, Florida HashiCorp users group. Check that out on Meetup. There's also some other resources here if you want to start your own HashiCorp users group, or the doc site, the learn site, or the discuss site if you want to post. Please post and talk about some of these cultural things on the discuss site. There's lots of folks there using HashiCorp products, but are also going through organizational or cultural change. Thank you. Thank you again very much. I, again, invite you to write about and share your own experiences, whether they're good or bad, about taking reliability and thinking about it as a first-class product feature at your organization, and thinking about it not just as all of these activities that SRE does, but like, what is the actual impact and outcome of them? And that should be, I think, reliability as a product feature. So again, thank you so much. I'd love to hear more about what you're doing. Do a pull request to that How They SRE repo earlier. And thank you again.